I love franchise mode. It doesn't matter what sport it is, football, basketball, soccer, badminton, I don't give a shit. I love taking a team that could be fledgling, could be kind of struggling, and try to figure out a way to build them up and to make them a championship contender. I love playing GM. I love tinkering around with the finances. I love making trades. I love all of it. And I also really love MLB The Show. But franchise mode in MLB The Show fucking sucks. It's been virtually the same thing for the past 6, 7, 8 years, with only very slight, borderline cosmetic changes that really haven't moved the needle one way or the other. It's such an unrealistic experience to play MLB The Show's franchise mode. It's missing so many things that go into being a GM in Major League Baseball. And, you know, a lot of sports games kind of have this problem. Madden, their franchise mode isn't fantastic, but in my opinion, it's a lot better than MLB The Show's, and NBA 2K's is 1,000 miles better than MLB The Show. NBA's actually simulates a fairly realistic experience. And MLB The Show, it just seems like franchise has been ignored for far too long. This week, we are finding out what all they're going to be doing to franchise mode this year, and I'm extremely hopeful that they have made significant steps forward with this mode. I'm hopeful, but I'm not really... I don't know if they will, because I have 6, 7 years of track record that I'm working with here, and they really haven't done a lot at all. I remember last year there was a ton of complaints because it seemed like they didn't do hardly anything to franchise mode. All they did was introduce like a new simulation system to where you could jump in games and play memorable moments in those games. And yeah, okay, that's kind of a cool thing, but it really doesn't do anything to make franchise mode more realistic or honestly more playable. So, how do we fix franchise mode? Well, I have a few suggestions that I think can slowly be implemented over the course of the next year, 2 years, 3 years that will make franchise mode the best franchise mode in any sports game. So we're going to be talking about 4 major areas of need in franchise mode: prospects, player acquisition, finances, and then just a whole bunch of miscellaneous stuff that would just make the mode a lot cooler and a lot more fun to play. Starting out with the thing that I probably care the most about, prospects. Everyone who watches my channel knows that I am a prospect nut. I love following real-life prospects, watching them grow, trying to guess who is going to be a star, who is going to bust. I love it. It's part of my DNA. And I would love it if I could simulate that in a video game, but frankly, the prospect system in MLB The Show is just awful. It's not good, and there are a lot of things that they could do to make it an unbelievable part of a franchise mode. The first thing that they need to significantly improve on is the progression system, and I would like to see them implement a non-linear progression system. Right now, basically you draft a prospect or you have a prospect already in your organization and they have an assigned potential to them. And, you know, that makes sense. Like, every player has, like, a ceiling that they can hit in real life. But the problem with MLB The Show is that that ceiling is kind of set. And that every single prospect is going to slowly be making their way towards hitting that potential. Even if they don't necessarily get to that potential, the growth is always one way. You never have a player that significantly regresses or his ceiling comes down to a point to where he's not looked at as that top flight prospect anymore. It's a very linear system, and it's something that just isn't very representative of the way that players grow in real life. So how do you fix this? Well, I think that they need to add a new attribute or type of, I guess, a quasi attribute into the game that works alongside potential, called risk. I think that a player should have a certain amount of risk attached to them and a ceiling attached to them. So maybe you give them 99 potential, but they have a very, very, very high risk attached to them. So the likelihood of them hitting that potential is a lot lower than some other prospects. But if you get lucky, if that guy turns out to hit his ceiling, you're going to be stuck with not stuck, but you're going to have a superstar on your hand for many years to come. And on the same token, you could have a guy who doesn't necessarily have that superstar potential. Maybe his ceiling is more along the lines of like an 85 to 89 overall, but he's a very safe prospect. He doesn't have a lot of risk attached to him. He plays good defense. He has some speed. The only thing that's maybe lagging behind is his hit tool. And once he figures out that hit tool, he's going to be a very serviceable player for you in the future, and he's someone that you can kind of count on going forward. This is something that really needs to be implemented into franchise mode, and it would improve a ton, and it would make the mode so much more fun to play if we had more of a dynamic system whenever it comes to prospects. Sorry, I can't talk right now. And also, timetables need to be adjusted a little bit, and they need to add in those once in a generation type prospects, those 99 overall prospects who have not no risk, but a very small amount of risk attached to them. So you're almost guaranteeing that you're drafting or that you have a superstar in your organization. These players do occur occasionally. You have the Mike Trouts of the world, the Bryce Harpers of the world, who by the time they're in AA, you know that player is going to be a superstar. And, you know, lo and behold, they're winning MVPs now. We need those types of players in MLB The Show. And we also need to get a new timetable system to where you have players with varying ETAs, estimated time of arrival. Some players, whenever you draft them, you might think that they may make it to the majors very quick, but whether it's injuries, whether it's, you know, poor performance, or he has to work on something in the minor leagues, maybe that timetable gets extended out and he doesn't end up making his debut until he's 25. And then you might have another guy who just crushes everything whenever he hits in the minor leagues. Think of like a Ronald Acuna or Vladimir Guerrero Jr. right now, and you can pretty much count on that guy to make his debut definitely by the time he's 21. We need these type of dynamic implementations into the prospect system in not Diamond Dynasty, in franchise mode. Another thing I would like to see is a full minor league system. Right now we only have double and triple A, at least the full rosters for double and triple A, and then a very vague single A thing that you only can have 15 players on. It's a very weird system how they have it set up right now. I would like to see them expand that out and include every single minor league team that club that organization has. I would like to see high A. I'd like to see low A. I'd like to see the Gulf Coast League, the Dominican Summer League, and all of those things. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, how are we going to fill those rosters out? Because as it stands right now, they only have a 6-round draft, and it's, you know, you can't fill, or is it a 7-round draft? A 7-round draft, and you're not going to be able to fill those rosters with only 7 players each year. You're right, and that is why we need to have a full draft, and they need to separate out domestic and international prospects into 2 different systems, because that's how it is in real life. In real life, you have the domestic draft, where players from the United States and Puerto Rico, and I believe Canada, they get drafted into the major leagues, and you can't really get drafted until you graduate high school at the age of, older 17-year-olds and young 18-year-olds. So that's a big difference between the IFAs, the international free agents, and the July 2nd market, the J2 market, as a lot of people call it. The way that works is that in international countries like in Latin America and stuff like that, you can sign with an organization whenever you're 16 years old. And they have a lot of restrictions with these signings, you have a certain amount that you can spend every year, and if you go over that amount, you basically can't sign any big-time international free agents for 2 years. And it's a very interesting system, and it's one that I would really like to see implemented into MLB The Show. And if you had this, if you could have, you know, if you could be getting 30, 40 players from the draft every year, if you could be getting, you know, 10, 15 players from the J2 class, then you would have an easy time filling out those minor league rosters. Now, a lot of people may say that this seems like a very cumbersome addition, that they don't want to manage, you know, 16-year-olds in the Dominican Summer League. That's something that I can understand, and that's why I think that they would, if they did this, they would have to put in some sort of automating system to where those players would be effectively cared for in the lower minors until they grew, and you kind of knew what you had by the time they hit single A, double A, and that sort of thing. But it's something that really needs to be into the game just for the stability of players coming up and being effective at the major league level. It's kind of a janky system right now, and it needs to be fixed. The last thing that I want to see with prospects is more of a streamlined player development system. The player development right now, basically you just go into like the training and you choose whether or not you want them to train for power or contact, and it really doesn't seem to have that big of an effect. Personally, I'm really not all that big into training or anything like that. It just doesn't get me going in franchise mode to say, okay, this guy is going to bench press this season instead of long tossing. That's really not how it works. Players, you know, professional baseball players, they're doing everything to try to get better. So that's, you know, that's something that I'd like to see. I don't really care about training. Just kind of have them do it in the background and not have me worry about it. And that would kind of take away from the cumbersome feeling as well. Okay, moving on to player acquisition. This is another thing that is just really janky right now. The free agency system is very unrealistic. Generally, teams have a really easy time re-signing players that are eligible for free agency for the first time, and this is not realistic at all, because if you have a top flight player who has spent his 6 years in the organization and he's finally eligible for free agency, it is very difficult to retain that player and not have him test out free agency to see what his market value is. And in this game, it seems quite easy for most teams around the league to retain their Bryce Harpers, their Manny Machados. Now, every year you will have like 3 or 4 guys on the free agent market who are pretty good, maybe even really good, but the way I see teams re-signing players and everything this season, it just doesn't seem like they're having a tough enough time re-signing those guys, because I guarantee you next season, Bryce Harper, Manny Machado, all those guys, they are going to be testing free agency and they are going to get a ton of money, and that's something that I would kind of like to see in MLB The Show. However, there is something that I think could be implemented that could make it a little bit easy, not easier, but a little more realistic when it comes to re-signing those young superstars, and that is mid-season extensions. Just think about this. You have a young prospect who is very promising. You think that he's going to be with your organization for a long, or he's going to be very good for your organization for the 6 years that you have him. So, and you have a little extra money put back, so you want to take a risk. You want to try to buy out an extra year or two before that guy can hit free agency. You have him for 6 years, but you want him for 7 or 8. So you decide to offer him a little bit more money up front, because they're not going to be earning a lot of money in their first 3 years in the majors. So you say, here, I'll give you an extra few million here in your first 3 years, but in exchange, I'm going to want your first and second free agency season, and you can even make those into like options or something like that, something that they do in real life. We've seen it a couple times this year. I think the Cardinals just did this with DeHong. And it's something that happens all the time, and it generally happens in the middle of the season. So a system like this, I think, would go a long way with kind of balancing out the free agency system and how you acquire players. Also, there needs to be a progressive inflation rate when it comes to how much you're paying these players. Generally, year over year, it's about 3.5% increase. And you know how much these players are getting paid and how much payroll is going up for teams and everything like that. So that's something that I'd like to see. But we can kind of talk about that when it comes to finances and stuff. That seems like more of a finance thing than a player acquisition thing. Next is something that I know everybody has experienced and everybody has complained about and everybody thinks is stupid. And that is the trade system. It is possibly the dumbest part of the current iteration of franchise mode. It is so damn stupid. The AI is awful. You can exploit the shit out of AI. Even if you don't have forced trades on, you can figure out ways to make completely unbalanced trades. The AI is so stupid. And also, prospects are heavily misvalued. Some are way undervalued. Some are incredibly overvalued. Like, you could probably get 2 of those overvalued prospects and get Mike Trout or some shit like that. It's way overblown. And the thing I don't understand about this is that this isn't a difficult thing to implement, good trade logic, because we know exactly how much prospects are worth nowadays in relation to their major league counterparts. Fangraphs has done studies on this every single year, and they know exactly how much, we call it surplus value. We know exactly how much surplus value each prospect is worth, dependent on whether they're a hitter or a pitcher and where they're ranked in top 100 lists. All MLB The Show would have to do is write some programming for franchise mode that kind of took surplus value into account, and boom, you have a much better trade logic system than you do now. And this is something that really, I mean, guys, it's ridiculous how stupid the trade system is. It really, really is. And the stupidest thing about it, it's not even the logic. It's the fact that you can only trade 3 players at a time. Like, the maximum trade is a 6-player trade, 3 from each team. That needs to be completely done away with. You need to be able to send 5 top-flight prospects in order to get someone like Mike Trout. They need to completely remove the cap on how many players you can trade to a certain team, because to get someone like Mike Trout in trade, you are going to have to freaking unload your farm system. It's extremely cost prohibitive, and the fact that you can only trade 3 at a time, it makes me feel like they have to inflate how much these players are worth and kind of deflate how much Mike Trout is worth to accommodate for that. That's a really bad system that needs to be completely done away with. Quickly, I want to talk about finances, because the finances are probably the least important thing, and kind of also the most important thing, because having a stable financial system in franchise mode is one of the cornerstones of keeping it from breaking, from, you know, keeping it as realistic as possible. But it's not something that I care about a ton, and it's also not something that I know enough about to really comment on how they could make it as realistic as possible. But I do know a few things. I do know that there needs to be revenue sharing, and they need to have revenue sharing brackets. If you don't know, in Major League Baseball, they basically have brackets depending on how much your payroll is. If you have a really low payroll, you're what's called like a revenue receiving club, and you get certain benefits from that. One, you get, like, whenever the league decides to pool some of its money, you actually get money back instead of having to pay money. You also get certain benefits when it comes to the draft. You get certain benefits when it comes to signing free agents, and you get certain benefits when it comes to the international, you know, the J2 market. So it's really important to have these things, and it's also important to keep teams kind of on an even-ish playing field, even when one team has a lot more money than the other. And basically it would just create more stability in league finances. We also need a luxury tax threshold that we see in real life. In real life, it kind of works as a quasi salary cap. It's not really a salary cap because you can go over it, but you're going to be paying a lot of money if you end up going over the luxury tax threshold. That's why we see teams like the Dodgers, who did so much this offseason to kind of backload their payroll, so they don't have to pay that luxury tax, because it's a really harsh penalty if you do decide to go over it. That's something that I would like to see put into franchise mode. And also, this is just kind of, I was going to talk about inflation rates here, but I kind of already talked about it. We just need the league to kind of grow with the natural economy, and that's not something that would be extremely important, because this is isolated from real life, but I don't know, for realism's sake, it would be something that's kind of cool. And finally, there are a couple things that would just be fucking fun. It would just be fun to have this in MLB The Show, and everyone's clamoring for it. We all want to see it, and that is basically more of an owner type mode, where you're dealing with ideas of relocation. You're having to deal with like concession stand prizes, selling out advertisements, and stuff like that. We want to have the ability to have full control of our franchise, and we don't want to be stuck. If we're the Oakland A's, we don't want to be stuck in Oakland. We want to make the decision: do we want to stay in Oakland and try to rebuild the new stadium, or do we want to move to maybe a more fruitful market and have several different cities that teams could potentially move to, all with kind of a cost benefit? Like, let's say that you wanted to move to a big market, and but the only like really big markets available are international, so you have to move somewhere like like Mexico City, where it might take you a while to kind of build that rabid fan base that you need to survive. Or you can move to a smaller city that's just really clamoring for baseball, and if you move there, you're going to have an extremely loyal fan base, but you're not going to be in as big of a market, so it might affect your finances down the road. This is something that I would love to see put in, and it would just be so much fun to have control over these things and to have an in-depth uniform designer mode or whatever. We already kind of have the framework put in place in Diamond Dynasty for this. I have to believe that it'd be relatively easy to implement this into franchise mode, since we basically already have it in the game. I don't understand why they haven't done it already. Have like a logo designer, have the uniform designer. It would be so cool. And I would play the hell out of franchise mode if you could do something like that. And then the other thing is just a stadium creator, man. I know we're probably not going to have it this year. This is something that we got to have. Maybe not in online gameplay, maybe not in Diamond Dynasty, but in franchise mode, we need to be able to create our own stadium, have our own backdrop, have our own architectural design, have our own dimensions. Do we want to have some crazy, funky dimensions that look like a penis? Yeah, I saw that on Reddit today. Penis dimensions, where I can just kind of imagine. But anyways, it would be awesome, and that's something that everyone wants to see. Get it done, SDS. By 2019, it's create a stadium or riot, basically. Anyways, guys, that is going to do it for what I want to see in franchise mode. I know that they're not going to be able to get all of this in this year. This is something that I'd like to see them implement over the course of several years. Maybe get one or two of the things that I talked about every single year. By the time that MLB The Show 2020 comes out, it could be the best mode in sports gaming. So yeah, get it done, SDS. Make franchise better. I promise you, if you pay attention to it, people will play it. I know that you think not a lot of people play franchise anymore now that we have Diamond Dynasty. I promise you they still do. And also, next year, get online franchise back in. It sucks that you guys had to take it out. I understand it, that you guys are trying to work with the servers that you have and everything. And I understand that not a ton of people play online franchise. But get it done, man. Get it back into the game by next year, so that those people that do enjoy that can have that. This is a game for everybody. People that like offline, people that like online, and I want you to serve both communities equally. And yeah, I think all these changes, people would really like it. I know I personally would love it. But yeah, guys, that is going to do it for this video. I love you guys. I will see you guys later on. But until then, peace.
When you see those cheeks, you get the rear view. Oh yeah, your pussy gets all wet, son. You don't have a pussy? Your dick gets hard, son. You get angry, 'cause now you think you're gay.